Thank you, Maya. Thank you for the invitation. I'm really pleased to be in such a great panel as today with even more attractive title like Deadly Beauty. It sounds like very noir. So in my talk, actually today, I'm not going to talk about gender as previous speakers. I would give more philosophical discussion of what does feminist film means today regarding documentary. And by film documentary, I mean, I'm going to discuss a further possible new epistemology of the fem film and specifically fem film labor. So labor moves that reflect the invisible reality and the tendency of reconstruction. So there are two parts of my talk. One would be philosophical, another part would be applicable, but I would enter this with the main concept, why is it important for me and why I think that we must discuss, we have to discuss about the epistemology and to try to find a new way of discussion when we want to talk about specific issues. So it would be focused on the feminist historical materialism and social reproduction theory, where domestic labor would be my main concept of my talk. And there would be a lot of Deleuzian and Guattarian philosophy of the cinema and art, in particular, in understanding the cinema as a medium of expression rather than as medium of representation. So I'm not going to talk about from the point of representation today, but more about the fem film as expression. So something I wish to call it expression of the narrative as a different way of finding the moment of representation, but how it deals with complex categories such as social reproduction theory. So the relationship between Guattarian and Deleuzian reconstruction of film and feminist perspectives are important for me, not along the lines of the subject and object, but along the lines of an assemblage that fosters connection in many layered directions. So an assemblage for Deleuze and Felix Guattari is made up of various connections. However, it is not about a fixed entity of what I'm talking about, since the relationship between these connections, indeed, the connections themselves are constantly changing. So we are talking about feminist film as epistemology, and especially feminist film documentary, while we want to shoot a movie, while we want to discuss about reality that is constantly in changing. So this means that that assemblage actually has the potential to produce new kinds of interactions. So what I'm going to talk today is how to find a way to speak very precisely about those new kinds of interaction between terms, ideas, discourses, politics, ideology, but more important about institutions and the way we want to talk and to connect film, fem film, and economy and social reproduction theory. So in the middle of all these concepts, actually, I want to open a talk and a lot to open a very subversive position of what I want to set up like political struggle, where women are set to, no matter where they come from inside the film or from outside the film. So when we want to talk about aesthetics, it's a really more complex issue, because my first aspect would be that to explain that Deleuzian and Guattarian sense of how aesthetics could be set up in all these and still to be at the terrain of epistemology. So how can I connect my interest of historical materialism, social reproduction theory, and aesthetics of femme film documentary. So how do I see on all of this? First, I find this very important in regarding something in social reproduction theory, we call it affect theory. So affect theory particularly treats domestic labor as really very neglected and invisible issue, understood in terms of affective capacity, extended Marxist feminism film, concerns with social reproduction theory. And here comes the question, to what extent can affect contribute to different elaboration of femme film documentary? Is it Marxism? Is it Marxist feminism? Or is it some kind of tiny feminism that could give an answer about those kind of relationship, aesthetics, affects, and different kind of capacity that could trigger ideology, politics, and political struggles as really important issue when we want to talk about these stuff. So I answered these questions by developing femme film through affected theory as embodied concepts of capacity, flow, force, invisible justice, invisible injustice, solidarity, left, and the position of power. Really complex questions, but starting points of giving some unfolding answers. If one of the central tasks of socialists, for example, feminism, is to analyze the material basis of society control, then affect theory is essential to achieving each other's critical potential in femme film. So I'm talking today about how to present the feminist concept of social reproduction theory in terms of aesthetics of affect. So how to catch that effect, how to put it in a movie while you want to shoot the film and to change the reality. So in that sense, the next point of my talk would be is effective reading of something that Lisa Vogel, a really important author, philosopher regarding social reproduction theory, name it as need for sensation, to give and to express yourself through that need for sensation. I conclude this topic of discussion by sketching the implication of what I'm going to read as a concept of freedom in cinema, which is assemblage in Deleuzian and Guattarian sense by social reproduction theory. So please know this, assemblage of social reproduction. So something that maybe in Black feminist critique or Marxist feminism, we have it like we put it in a labor or historical materialism and how we deal with material aspects, but in capitalism. So in that sense, starting position of epistemological talk about feminist film documentary is that not all bodies circulate, produce, or affects the interact in the same way within the relation and modes of capitalism on film that always already are in changing position. So this transit zone is very important for me because now we have, let's say, gendered, sexualized, colonized bodies, their experience, but all of them are constituted by the affective structures of any mode of productions in different ways that are always already in change. So I'm interested in those transit zones, tiny transit zones that while we are talking and shooting documentaries, we are talking about materialistic way that is already in change. So that is not singular capitalist body or labor body, not even more. We are not even talking about labor body, but intersectional body, intersectional feministic position of the documentary or of the, how to say, possibility of the documentary because it is happening in the affective zone of realization. And now I have two grand questions. First, how can affect theory in film documentary, and particularly a notion of the body in terms of affective capacity, could be extended? And how the social reproduction, as a second question, can affect that extended body, and how can contribute to different elaboration of filmosophy now. So in the middle of this, I wish to reread a really dear theorist. She's not philosopher, but she's sociologist, but really dear and important theorist regarding these topics. She's Kathy Weeks. And Kathy Weeks' discussion on affective and immaterial labor could give broaden claim to argue how these kind of film feminism, documentary feminism, anticipate to some concerns of affect theory as such, and does so especially, let's say, as it rethink labor and reproduction. So I try to render explicit connection between notions of affect and film documentary, or socialist feminism, in a way that expands connections between notion of effects. And following weeks, Kathy Weeks, could we call these about engagement of the philosophers to talk about or to connect feminist practice as well as artistic practice, and how we deal with theory and practice while we discuss and while we make films. And now another really important theorist I'm going through her work is Heidi Hartman, and she's here too to argue. And following her, I wish to open a talk about central task of film documentaries to explore actually the basic of material basis of society, because it's all about social structures and power through which the labor of women is directed. And all of this leads me to the third point of this discussion, and that is really we are talking, when we talk about feminist film documentaries, we are talking about material base of the society, and really this is continuing important to another thing that is really set up into materialism, but in a broader sense of capitalism. Lisa Vogel, in this sense, is really important because she gives the expression of the humans, and humans put in a subjects of film that need this kind of sensation as affect of the cinema. And these concepts, if we unfold it or extend it in the concerns of the film, then really those components are, I think, maybe give more generative connections and the distinctions of the affect and thinkers within socialist feminism. So this part of the affect theory for me is most productively important, because we should extend and supplement the central social concepts by inserting them in an effective register on film and critical thinking. In general, affect theory thinks through embodiment, that's right. But what kind of sensation in an interactive way is another part to open the tropes, let's say, from Cartesian dualism to the dichotomy of Deleuze and Guattarian thoughts on aspects and social activities. Actually, the process of creating new intersectional humanism is important for me, and how to be set in film, in feminist documentary. So these affective capacities shaped by production of material life, of creation of new needs, are the same affective capacities involves into the why humans daily recreate their own life in film, especially in feminist film. Because now we have questions on women and social relations and labor power. So fan film requires really leaving even the labor capacities as we know until today, because abolishing the classy labor understanding gives a way to the effective, to the new door, a way to the new door, to effective capacity of the essential powers or category of social reproduction theory that could replace the power and capacity in new types of films, new types of shooting films, fan film documentaries that would open really while they're happening in production, they really have power to change the reality. So in that sense, if we try to put that epistemic ground, then I wish to open something that Vogel named it as rudiments of the theoretical foundation for analyzing the situation of women on cinema now, I would say, from the point of view of social reproduction theory, not from the point of view, let's say, like Laura Mulvey, or at the level of the against at the level of narrative, but from the point of view of social reproduction theory. Could we talk about labor and power and social structures as a relevant point of view, so aesthetical point of view, and in the full power, that means to locate, to set up the oppression in social reproduction theory, but also to have power to change it in a given setup of society. So I argue that the maintenance of these kinds involves really a regeneration of the capacities for affecting and being affected on cinema. And of course, this has history. I suggest we need effective capacity and the essential powers of the body on fan film, where meaning of the reproduction of labor power is actually in continuous shifted, but in a capitalist society. So this makes things even more complex. It is about feminist historical materialism and social reproduction theory, but what does it mean when we want to explore new directions in democracy? And really, it is Hegelian position of dialectical materialism and fem film. So my talk is not, as I said, about gender, but I want to open discussion about broadly condition for production of art labor, specifically art production and cinema production, in direct relation to produce the truth. So that's why I'm saying this is really Hegelian position, because cinema within the broader field of social reproduction aesthetics has always been closely tied to filmmaking activity. And that is really materialistic way of thinking, because in many cases, the same subjects have doubled as both artistic and philosophical aspects, but always in intervention of to the power in reality and structural moments, which is really Althusserian ideological position and requires knowledge from political theory and idea of a feminist documentary. I think it's really connected, or the most close way to unfold this is to find track from the epistemology of political philosophy, because we deal with when I'm saying we deal, that means that people from the feminist documentaries deal with transformation of the world in new direction of the concept of class and society. So fem film as discipline is about really anti-capitalist cinema, and this opens a talk of classical aesthetics, so the form or the content distinction. It's really a political take and communicating a political message. Conventional film form or experimental approach with new formal structures as interruption, as loop, as intervention to capitalism and mainstream cinema, but also power. It's about power and position of structural issues in society. One of the main line is about reconstruction, that is a politically regressive nature of mainstream cinema, really giving space for potential intelligible political discourse. And in the best case for us, of course, that is something that is rooted in Eisenstein, work of Godard. Yesterday, you've been talking about that a lot more. And here, form in Hegelian sense become content. So creating new film cinema is ideological issues. So it is about against commercial cinema and against capitalism in the very essence of its existence, because it's about class struggle. It's about finding a new way to talk about neglected issues par excellence. And because the cinema is defined by determination of the dominant ideology of a given time, of a given society, that's why it's a historical materialism issue. First, films are, let's be clear, traditionally extremely expensive to produce, which means that the kind of free artistic experimentation that has marked the history of other arts, let's say, has been far more difficult to organize, of course, in the cinema, which thinks on the mass audience, of course. So that's why it's a matter of financial stuff. So secondly, as a medium based on the photographic image, film has a tendency to reinforce the existence ideology. So by creating sensation, of course, in the audience. So that reflects the reality. And in that sense, feminist documentary cinema put the question, maybe is realism a direction for creating revolutionary cinema, red cinema, right way to discuss about. And in that sense, how to say, I'm concerned and I want to find a way to develop that thought of Gotharian and Deleuzian sense of talking about the cinema as expression, because that is a way how to make or how to match the practice and philosophy as well in one way of finding even distorted way of expression, but still that could be that loop or that gap that could open a way to social reproduction theory. Of course, when I'm talking to these, I have on my mind several movies, classic movies, not so from the past, but really that we could discuss, like, for example, American Revolutionary, the evolution of Grace Lee books, where Angela Davis says of the Chinese American activists that Grace has made more contributions to the African-American struggle than most Black people have. And we can discuss about maybe later more about this, maybe later. Then another movie, he named me Malala and Davis Guggenheim. What Happened, Miss Simone, Nina Simone, Maya Angelou, and Still I Rise. So I'm mentioning those films that they're not so in the past, even from 10 years ago or so, maybe 5 years ago. But the importance of these documentaries for me are important because I want to track actually the history, because we don't have when we speak about social reproduction theory, maybe at the level of representation, of course, we have feminist topics like kitchen, like home, like archetypes of women bodies, maybe, but that's more in the gender politics. But we don't have the clear and the very, how to say, rich history in a sense. While you shoot movie, you change the history, but still opening those kind of discussion how to track history of film documentary, and more radical maybe history, like this movie Free Angela and All Political Prisoners, that is really hit on Amazon, where Black women was the establishment in 70s, especially one who was also a member of the Communist Party. I'm talking about Angela Davis, and so on. So we can discuss about this more, how that looks like in specific concrete films. But also, I wish to open, and that would be the final conclusion for my talk today. That probably we have a very important roots in French and American history, and the context is really important when we talk about G. Vertov or Eisenstein, and also Kino Pravda. And I wish to mention there is an anarchist library at Berkeley where it's now my really important library. I use it so that treats this part of revolutionary film cinema and roots of it. And I would make a connection probably with the most important year for us, and that is May 68, when we can talk about France and Frankfurt School and revolt of the students. Why this is important? Because it was reaction to university conditions, classrooms, teachers, of course, and also that connection between government and violent demonstrations opened up a new way of thinking the film. In that sense, this part I would wrap and closed up with several really important historical events that we want to read it as maybe the really complex historical periods when talking about film documentary. So it is 60s, there are 60s, the formation of the Black Panther Party, then 66, the beginning of the Chinese Cultural Revolution, 68 in France, subsequent students' riots in Germany and Italy, then Prague Spring, and then the United States civil rights. I'm talking about globally, of course, and maybe then 68 Chicago Democratic National Convention, and LA 68 riots in Southwest Watts. So I would like to think that maybe, yeah, Godard, and maybe later Antonioni, and maybe later Wildband, no matter how in dialectical materialism has opponent in what is feminist film, but really has a really good oppositional position and roots among filmmakers, film journals, film collectives, and opens really important days and years how to reread feminist film documentary, and of course Agnes Varda, that we can speak later for her more. Thank you. So that would be my talk for today.